to another episode of Local Voices, Different Perspectives. I've got a very special guest with me. He's going to introduce herself. Take it away, Nicola.
Hi, my name's Nicola. I don't really claim to have any speciality with regards to COVID-19. I don't claim to have any scientific background. In fact, I studied probably for about 8 years whilst working part-time and doing a business studies honours degree. I then moved on to beauty therapy. So I did an HND in that for 2 years and a further HNC in complementary therapy. So I would more say I've got a kind of inkling as to researching and looking into things. I enjoy studying and finding out about things. So at the end of my course was kind of teetering on the beginning of COVID lockdown restrictions. So I found myself coming to the end of my course, completing that and kind of at a loss what to do because I was on furlough for 5 months. Found myself with all this time in my hands. So I just found myself researching things about COVID-19 because I was intrigued about how the restrictions were extended and extended. It was 3 weeks, another 3 weeks, and it was indefinite. It kept going on. So I found myself looking at scientific studies and I joined groups and went through websites.
Is that a new thing for you to be researching, or is your business studies that kind of primed you for that a wee bit?
It definitely primed me for it. I enjoy researching and finding out things and learning about things. So I was used to doing that and I think I kind of missed it. So I found myself doing it again out of habit as well, but out of interest. There was a lot of stuff that I found really, really interesting and intriguing. Especially when I was looking at the scientific journals and what people were debating. Even the scientists didn't know what COVID was, or had it been isolated, had it been purified, what did isolated mean and what does purified mean and all this, and they were getting it mixed up. They were claiming it was isolated, but it hadn't actually been purified and proven to actually cause something. Which is totally different from just saying, oh, it's isolated. Yeah, we've isolated it and this is the cause. But other scientists were actually arguing about it online. And I was like, they don't even know what's going on, you know. So I found that really, really interesting and intriguing. And then I went on to kind of look at PCR testing and how that worked. And then I was astounded to find out all the things that I found out.
Well, let's go through that then one at a time. I would like to start by asking you, you've maybe answered that a wee bit already, but why would you want to appear in the channel, Nicola?
I think I've probably had a lot of kind of online chats with people.
Okay.
I feel maybe people find sometimes I come across as argumentative if I'm putting points across, whereas I'm not argumentative, I'm trying to be helpful. But there's no personality behind the comments or the facts or the information you're presenting, so people take it as if you're being argumentative, as if you're trying to shove your opinions down their throat when it's not the case. You're just like, look what I've found and this is really interesting and what do you think about that, and you're trying to get something across to people and look, this isn't right and that isn't right and we need to kind of work together and find out what's actually going on. So it's more of a challenge as opposed to, but actually getting people to see from my side I found difficult. So I do feel that I found out an awful lot during the lockdown. As I say, I was off for 5 months, didn't work at all, and worked from home part-time as well, while I was bringing up my 2 boys later on. So I still had a few days to myself, especially when it was winter and cold and it was like nothing else to do. And I didn't like watching TV constantly, so I liked to challenge myself to look at things, and I found myself reading all sorts of scientific studies, and you don't have to be a scientist to do that either. So anybody can sit and read them. They're quite easy to understand. The conclusions that they come up with are easy for anybody to understand.
You found that a wee bit hard not hard, but maybe Facebook and social media wasn't the right medium for you to get your point across.
Definitely, because I think a lot of people don't want to read if it's a lengthy study, or if it's, you post different things in the comments and then people are saying, I don't want to read that, it's a novel. Write it in a paragraph, and I'm like, I can't possibly write all the things I've learned in a paragraph. It's physically impossible.
Especially if you can go on Local Voices and just say everything you've learned.
Yeah, I don't even think I'm able to cover it all. There's that much, to be honest. Well, I think initially everybody was quite full on. Everybody was really, really wanting to get on board, to do the lockdown, do the restrictions, and everybody was a bit scared, to be honest. So everybody kind of locked themselves away, did the right thing, bought excess amounts of loo roll, let's go with it. I don't know why people decided to buy a loo roll, but there you go. There's always a funny aspect to certain things as well.
No.
But I do feel as if people took it, on board. The streets were dead, the roads were dead, everybody kind of started to do things the right way. But then after a time, people are like, well, how long is this really going to go on for? Have we not broke the chain of transmission if you believe viruses can be transmitted through speaking, breathing, coughing, sneezing, whatever it may be? Why aren't we back out of the lockdowns now? Why haven't they worked? And it's always flatten the curve, save the NHS. And then when you do try to point things out, and you're like, well, why can't this change, or why can't that change, or do masks really work? Do lockdowns really work? And I feel as if there's a division of people online now. People can be quite nasty. You're termed a granny killer, a conspiracy theorist. Oh, you do. Yeah, I know, that's what it's like. You're trying to protect the elderly, it's the elderly that are dying. So people are saying, well, why don't you want to do this? And why don't you stick to the rules? And just why, it's not that I didn't stick to the rules.
Exactly.
I was questioning the rules.
So the very fact you were questioning, you were coming across that type of reception just by questioning.
Yeah. And I found that was pretty harsh, because a lot of people took it the wrong way, or don't be silly, the government wouldn't be doing this, the whole countries across the world wouldn't be doing this, they wouldn't all be in a conspiracy, why would they lie about things? And I'm like, well, why would they? We all need to question this, but where is the science that they're basing anything on?
And do you think that was a change, like before COVID, do you think there was more dialogue and more opportunity, or do you think that's became harder after it?
I think there was a period initially after the lockdown, and then when people were starting to question things, I think there was a flutter of people chatting and debating, and I think that was quite good. It was healthy.
I remember that.
Even though a lot of people were saying, but I know such and such has had it, and such has had it, and I wouldn't want that. And I was like, I totally understand that. I really do. It's not like we're saying people haven't passed away, and that's horrific that people have passed away, and they've had horrible outcomes, but it actually hasn't been proven what they've passed away of. So that was my key point. Like, well, they're telling you it's this, but what if it's something else? And what if your loved one's been told that they passed away from COVID, but it actually wasn't, and you're being lied to? So it's not that I'm coming at it at a horrible angle, dismissing it and saying nobody died, and these are all liars. It's like, well, why can't we see the evidence, and why can't they show us the proof that masks work, the proofs that lockdown work? If we're following the science, show the public the science, and let us all have a healthy debate. Let the scientists debate it, not just general public. But why can't we have debates about it?
Well, just in that point, it'd be nice, but I think it'd be quite good, Nicola, if we could talk about your kind of process. Like, you mentioned about the changes at the start and the healthy debate, but you obviously were questioning things. Talk us through that. Like, how were you questioning? What was your process? Did you get involved with any groups, or start speaking to people that you perhaps didn't speak to before?
Yeah, definitely. There was a few groups that actually started up, and I joined them just to see what they were saying initially and follow them. I didn't really comment much to begin with, to see their stance on things. And then a lot of kind of more evidence was coming out and factual things, and I just thought, oh my goodness, that's really quite interesting. I found that astonishing, especially with the PCR testing, because I believe it created a lot of false positives. And some people can argue, well, it must have created false negatives as well, but I think that's not the case. I do believe it was more false positives, because that's the prevalence, and even, the politicians were online talking about it themselves, and they admitted it does. So for me, I was like, why are we still even following this, using this test that creates so many false positives? And so there were certain groups that would show all these things, and there was ones about, there was lawyers on it, and people that were credible, and doctors coming up and speaking
about it. Even the inventor
it.
of the PCR test himself, I saw a footage of him kind of questioning how...
Misuse PCR to estimate all these supposed free viral RNAs that may or may not be there.
I think misuse PCR is not quite. I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. See, if you can say, if they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. It is. No, there's very little of what they call HIV, and what's been brought out here by Philpott and Isai already, the measurement for it is not exact at all. It's not as good as our measurement for things like apples. An apple is an apple. You know, you can get something that's kind of like, if you got enough things that look kind of like an apple and you stick them all together, you might think it's an apple. But and HIV is like that. Those tests are all based on things that are invisible, and the results are inferred in a sense. PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what
Also,
it is. But it's not. It doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you or anything like that.
The PCR, but obviously he died just before this whole situation, but
yeah, I find that really interesting as well, and even though it was fact-checked multiple times and saying this isn't true, that's another fact, that we really, that we're all fact-checked now, and who's checking the fact-checkers?
Exactly.
I mean, they're really all probably paid for, and they've got an alignment as well to...
and it's independent fact-checkers is the title, but I wonder how many people actually question how independent they are,
And that's what a lot of these groups were doing and people were doing, and as I say, I've gained a lot of kind of new friends that I've never spoke to before because I've seen their post shared and I thought, that's really interesting, that's spot on, or that resonates with me. And as I moved forward, there was actually people going on about suicides and cancelled cancer treatments and all the rest of it. So I actually got really passionate about that because I thought, this isn't fair. We're segregating everyone. We're dividing people. We're making people fearful of each other. We're fighting to breathe the same air or be close to someone or be in a shop beside each other. And you get all this funny looks if you're not wearing a mask, if you're exempt, and all this kind of thing. It creates so much division. But there's never been proof of all these things, and yet people are going on and on about these things. And so I do think that it created a lot of division.
Well, that's it. I think you're right. I feel as though at times it can be hard to even broach a subject with people. Like when you mention about the PCR test, or one of the things I like to talk about is what constitutes a COVID death. The difference between COVID related, dying after testing positive, and dying directly of COVID. It's quite rare that you can actually engage somebody in that.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah, again, I've got, as I say, I gained a few friends through this and they were posting things like that, and we all kind of found like a wee niche where we would all kind of help each other and boost each other's confidence. You're not alone in thinking this, here's more evidence, and there's almost so many coincidences where you can say it's actually a coincidence before it's like it becomes an avalanche, and it's like there's too many things here that it cannot just be coincidence anymore. Like for instance, you're talking about the deaths, died within 28 days, and then they changed it to died within 60 days, and then they lumped in the deaths with the flu. And you try to explain that to people how they've changed things along the way, and some people just don't believe you, even though it's on the government website as well.
Definitely, and sometimes you'll hear it said in Parliament. I think in Ireland, the Prime Minister stood up and was explaining about all the deaths that they've included, and sometimes that can be lost in translation because people read or listen to the news where it's saying 100,000 people have died after testing positive.
Yes.
But then somehow that becomes 100,000 people died of COVID.
Yes.
But that is it's just a real bit of language, but it changes the whole significance of it.
It does. It certainly does, and I feel that that's the perception of that is very wrong, and it's very misleading. And I do believe that the news and the mainstream media have got a lot to answer to, and the government as well. But I do believe there's a couple of court cases coming up where one lawyer's actually found out that Ofcom advised all of the mainstream media not to go against the government narrative.
Okay.
So, whereas I had family and friends saying, but Nicola, if this was true, it would be on the news. Well, now we know why it's not in the news. Because
well, it will be.
So again, it's interesting that the things that you find out. And I do believe that things have changed and people's thoughts have changed. I think it was a really good, healthy debate at points, and people were getting angry because they knew people that had it or caught it or had something kind of even passed away. I know other people who've passed away, but it wasn't of COVID, but they had COVID on their death certificate. Now actually had to fight to try and get that removed from the death certificate, but because they knew it wasn't COVID.
Aye.
So again, you've got both sides of this coin, and either way you look at it, the statistics aren't right because they've always been lied about in some way, shape or form. I do even believe that even the testing's been lied in some way, shape or form, because there have been several articles on that as well, where they've counted the nasal swab and the throat swab as two separate tests, so it's doubled the amount, you know, of people testing positive. And if we're basing restrictions on cases, then that's surely flawed, isn't it?
Aye, and I found as well, Nicola, the whole fascination around cases came in, and I found that strange because I felt as if at one point cases were being reported like they were deaths. And a question I always like to ask was, how deadly is the virus as a percentage? If you're over 60 with two or three comorbidities, what is that? How deadly is it? And then if you're younger than 60, younger than 50, younger than, and just go through it just to see how deadly it is. But it's as if a case became, and then we had that incident recently where, I don't know if you saw the gran that threw herself in front of a train.
Oh no.
Did you hear about that? She had flu-like symptoms, right? And she convinced herself that she had COVID, and rather than go and visit her grandchildren or have them come round because she thought she was going to give them COVID, she essentially committed suicide to jump in front of a train. And I just feel if you were to kind of sit back and present this lady with just a few stats around that, but you mentioned before the media is perhaps been reprehensible at times.
Yes. Majorly so, majorly so. Yeah, it's got, is it 99.97 recovery rate? The average age of mortality or the death is 82. The average age of death in the UK or Glasgow is 81. And that's not to dismiss anybody who's passed away at that age, because it's awful no matter which way you look at it.
I've never seen an 8-year-old around my way, actually. And then the West End, kind of.
Oh dear. But yeah, as you go down, as you say, the different age groups, it just gets less and less. I think somebody was saying to me, you've got more chance of being knocked down by a car than what you have of actually dying of COVID. So if you've got 99.97 recovery rate, why would you need a vaccine in the first place?
So you've obviously, Nicola, you've been looking into, and compared to other interviews that I've done, you've been looking more into the actual science of it. How have you found that? Have you enjoyed that? Is that new for you?
It's totally new for me. But it's easy to understand as well. I know that some people think, the scientific studies, how would you understand all that? But they summarise it, they put conclusions, so their findings, so you don't need to go into whole in depth. I have read a lot of them, and you don't just need to skim over them and do the summary and conclusion, but it does help because it then gives you a wee bit of an insight into what they've found and with their studies, if you can't understand the complexities within it.
So you're in dialogue with some people that's the field and things like that?
Well, I'm on some of the websites where they are, and so I follow the threads, so a lot of them talk globally on you've got PubMed and different ones where I follow, and you have a look at what they're questioning. The people have been asking, has it been isolated, has it been purified? And some people, as I say, we spoke about that earlier, they get mixed up with what that actually means. And then people are confusing the same, but is it SARS-CoV-1, is it SARS-CoV-2, what does a PCR to actually test for, is it one or either of, so there's still confusion between even the scientific community, never mind the public.
True, because sometimes you see scientists coming out. There was a guy recently, Vanden Bosch, the vaccine guy, he worked for GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca. This guy, I heard someone say he would put a needle in you to take your freckles away. That was his background. He's not averse. In fact, he's pro-vax.
Right.
He's pro-vax, but he's come out and questioned it as well. But it seems like you don't quite see that. I think Matt Hancock referred to them as outliers.
Yes.
Guys like Carol Hennigan and like that. It was like, you know.
Yeah, oh, it's bad, isn't it? Though I know that it's a Dr. Eden as well who spoke out about it. There's quite a few of them now that are out speaking about it, and there's actually global alliances in different countries. So there's one in Canada, there's one in Belgium, there's an American one, and it's thousands of doctors are joining together to try and speak out against this now, because they do believe that there's no need for a vaccine, that the vaccine could be harmful. It even states on the websites that we're still in the trial stages, and a lot of people don't know that, and I do believe that that's people being misinformed, and you're not really given the proper choice then. You just believe that it's been through the same safety test as every other vaccine, whereas it's not actually a vaccine. It's gene therapy. It can't actually be termed as a vaccine. So that's why they're calling it probably the jab.
The jab,
which is different. It deals with an RNA, so it's totally different type of jab or vaccine, if you want to call it, than has ever been used before.
Well, let's kind of dig into that, because it's quite a topical subject now, especially at this point that this video's been made. I think 26 million people in the UK. It's not for everyone, safe to say. Do you want to talk us through, Nicola, your concerns about the vaccine yourself?
Yeah, I've got many concerns about the vaccine.
I'll get comfy.
As I say.
I'll get comfy.
Well, if we've got a 99.97 recovery rate, that's without any interventions, without any medications to help you through that, then why is there a need for a vaccine in the first place? I've spoke to several people who have actually had the vaccine who've had adverse reactions to it. Minor, some of them, and other major, some of them as well, who believed, one person believed she was going to die. She's never felt pain like it in her life. She couldn't move for a couple of days. I mean, it's horrific. And these people are just, she was like, oh, but it's okay, it's fine, I'm still going to get the second shot because it's been safety tested and whatever else, but they've skipped certain things. And we're still in the trials, so they're not due to finish until like 2023, I believe it is, or whatever.
Efficacy study,
People aren't made aware of this, and I think people are being hoodwinked into taking this when they really don't need to take it. I know that it's a personal choice, and I do respect everybody's decision on this, and I'm quite, I mean, people can call me anti-vaxxer or whatever they want. I think that's another term that people use to bring people down, to discredit you, to make you look like some sort of conspiracy nut job. But
or like anti-science or something, you know,
yeah.
You do get that. You get the labels. We've had a few so far. Granny killer, conspiracy nut job. I like that one. Anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
So, but that isn't always helpful when you're trying to discuss something that's so important, especially when there's a kind of consensus going around that everyone needs to take this.
Yes.
Herd immunity is kind of came back in vogue.
Yes, I know, which again is terrifying to think about. I mean, we're locking up healthy people with no symptoms whatsoever. We're claiming everybody's potentially got it and maybe asymptomatic. Asymptomatic, I don't even believe has actually been proven. I mean, Fauci's been on the TV stating it several times that asymptomatic spread is not a driver for any pandemic. Even when you talk about pandemic, it wasn't classified as a pandemic way back in March. They declassified it. They made it lower level, so it no longer was highly contagious infectious disease.
They meet the criteria.
And even though they changed the criteria as well for a pandemic in the first place.
So
I found that was interesting as well. As I say, there's loads of, like, even doctors are frightened to speak out, but they will post certain things so that people are aware of things. But that's another thing, is your class as an anti-vaxxer, but what about doctors and nurses and who want to speak up about things, who have got this thing over their head where they could lose their licence? There's plenty that doctors are now that have spoke out that are really have immaculate careers, never done anything wrong, and now they're actually in the process of either getting their licence taken off them or had their licence taken off them and had their whole character called into repute, which is horrific again. As I say, there's lots of them now speaking out against it, and I do believe they're coming more organised and they're getting into groups now, because not one single doctor is not going to make a big deal of difference, but if they all come together, there was like the Great Barrington Declaration was one of them. But again, they tried to discredit that, saying that there's several people that have signed up to that and put their name against it who are just Mickey Mouse people. But then, obviously, people would try and discredit it by deliberately doing that as well.
Aye.
So
But I
do you
remember
dismiss
that.
the thousands of
Aye,
people
aye.
because
I
you've
know.
got a handful that have came through deliberately to try and discredit it and say, oh, my name's Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse or, you know, whatever.
I had that exchange where the person went right in on that, but it had been fact checked and all that. And I googled it to see like how are they coming back at me, but they completely skipped over. See the people that found you there, their CVs were immaculate and like as long as your arm. But a guy put his name down as Mickey Mouse, so let's forget about it.
Yeah,
you know?
And you're just like, that's deliberate. Come on.
Aye.
Where's people's common sense when it comes to all this now? Maybe the website wasn't set up professionally enough to kind of stop something like that happening, but are any of them? I mean, maybe it should have had postcodes and something to verify it, but then how do you go down that road? Is that GDPR? You know, all that? Is it petitions allowed to do that? But are websites like that allowed? There's a lot of things that we haven't actually came across before, and we know, you know, what's the right way to approach things. So, but people shouldn't be shut down. Doctors shouldn't be shut down. We should be allowed to have a proper scientific debate. I'm not a scientist, but I do follow what they're saying and what people are coming across with.
Criticize your choices, so don't get mad at mine. Our lives are gift to live, don't cross another's line. If seeing is believing.